Welcome, everybody, to another Microsoft Unboxed pod. And this is episode 62. I'm your host today, Kareem Anderson, and I'm joined by
David Allen. Hope everybody out there is doing well. Thank you for joining us for 62 episodes. And if you have not joined us before, welcome to the fun. Welcome to the chaos with a little bit of news mixed in.
Yeah, we have a sort of a busy week. We were just talking to Mike about how we didn't feel like it wasn't busy, but we have a few headlines that would bear the contrary. So let's get into what we're talking about this week. Make sure I got all that managed. We're talking about Copilot Vision being generally available. It is now out of beta testing, and you can go play with it yourself if you want. It's supposed to be big, and we'll kind of talk about the details of that. We're talking about Microsoft leaving the Seattle Convention Center, and for very specific reasons, and then what that means for the broader Microsoft Build Developer Conference and developer conferences in general, where Microsoft ranks amongst the big three, or maybe in the category of developer conferences as a whole, including Meta and Amazon and some others. We're also talking about the gaming landscape is changing, and if we are ready for it. David and I feel like we're ready for it, but we may just be some tech enthusiasts out on a very niche cliff. Former CEO Steve Ballmer of Microsoft had a very candid interview, about 3 hours long, where he kind of goes over some of the wins and successes as he held the CEO position. We get some information about a fight that him and Bill Gates had that basically led to about a year or two of them not talking, which is interesting because you always see them together, at least when they're in public events. And his candid admission about the failures of Windows Phone. He says a lot of stuff that all of us have been screaming at the top of our lungs for 10 years about, but at least he's on record acknowledging that he's no longer delusional about those things. We also had WWDC earlier this week. This is where we get to rant about Apple not only being behind, but kind of reveling in it, and then their new UI design choice, and where we see, I say see because that's a pun, this going in the future for them. We also will be talking about what we're going to be doing speaking because it is Father's Day weekend, but there's gaming to be had. So we'll be talking about the games that we are planning on playing or we're taking our time to do. I believe that's most of them. Oh, one last one. Google is doing a soft layoff called a buyout. Those of you who have at least been following politics, you understand that this is something that's been implemented where you basically offer employees to leave on their own reconnaissance versus firing them. And in doing so, you offer them what could be perceived as a benefits package that is enticing. Google's trying to do this in conjunction with their back to office mandate. They see it as twofold. If you don't want to come back to the office 5 days a week, you can take this buyout and leave the company altogether. I think they're just hoping to offset a lot of their AI investments with these perceived layoffs. We'll get into the details about what Google employees can expect if and when they see this email come through. With that being said, I'm going to stop rambling and let my co-host take the first story, which I believe is what did I have here?
What do you have first, my friend?
The ROG Ally, my friend. ROG Ally.
All right, so we're going to jump right into some gaming. At the Xbox Gamers Showcase, I think it was called, Summer Game Showcase. Let me make sure I get my names right. Summer Game Showcase kind of surprised us because going into this, I expected there to be games, lots of games. It was said to be about before it happened, it was said to be about a 40, 45-minute show. I didn't really expect this at this time, but I'm glad we did it. So what we have is the first Xbox branded handheld that is a partnership with ASUS. We have the ROG Xbox Ally and we have the ROG Xbox Ally X. Now, what's the difference between these two and why are we doing it? Well, let's kind of get into it here. The ROG Xbox Ally is based off a new chip that has not been put in a handheld yet, the AMD Ryzen Z2A. It has 16 gigs of memory, and 512 gig of storage. Now, let me, put it out there already. We do not know pricing. We do not know if and when pre-orders will start. These devices, we're looking at holiday 2025, according to Microsoft. So, when you read these specs and you try to compare them to the Ally X that's out there, maybe they do compare, maybe they don't. We just don't know. But we do have the first official Xbox button. You can see it up there in the screenshot in the left-hand corner. So we have the first third-party hardware with the official Xbox button. You'll notice that the controllers kind of have this angled look to them to kind of give them that feel of the two, I call them stubs, of the two stubs coming off of the Xbox controller to kind of give you that feel of holding an Xbox controller. Now, I'm going to slide down to the Ally X for just a minute. That's kind of for me, really, the gamer that wants it all. That's your top spec. It still runs the AMD Ryzen AI Z2. Now, notice there's an AI difference here. This chip makes those AI operations easier. It supports gaming Copilot. You have 24 gigs of RAM. You have 1 terabyte of storage. Now, if you look down at the comparison chart for the two, the Ally X, let me make sure I get these right. The Ally X does have a little bit bigger battery. It's coming in at 80 watts, while the the standard Ally is only coming in at 60 watts. So that, maybe that calculates the difference for the better CPU, the Z2 Extreme. We'll just have to wait and see. There is a software component to this I will get into in just a minute. But before I go any further, my friend, what are your thoughts? Microsoft has finally officially entered the handheld space. And we're not just looking at these third-party devices going, this is what Microsoft needs to be doing. For me, this is the sign of the play anywhere pivot that Phil Spencer has been just pounding in the ground relentlessly for the past 3 or 4 years. But what do you think? Right, wrong, indifferent, kind of a mix of both?
I think it's right. If I again describe what we're seeing on our screen, for those who are listening, imagine if you took an Xbox controller that was made of putty and pulled it about 8 inches apart and then put a screen in the middle. That's kind of what the design is like compared to the previous one, which was more of a holistic piece that didn't have the kind of angled joysticks at the bottom. So visually speaking, that's the difference. I think aside from the Xbox button, the other difference, which is I think what most people are more excited about and talking about, is the fact that this ROG Ally, which is Windows powered, will obfuscate a lot of the Windows functionality.
Yes.
This is where anybody who's reviewed it, if you go online after you're listening to this podcast and look up some reviews, or at least hands-on, because again, we haven't had the device to review just yet. A lot of reviewers, including KBHD and Dave TD, a lot of these people were saying that the idea of being able to just turn this thing on and to jump straight into the Xbox app is the best part of this device. Now, yeah, the specs are nice, but they may even be dated, if this thing releases 6 months from now. But the idea that, SteamOS was getting rave reviews about a week and a half ago, but the ease of use, the UI functionality, the UX of SteamOS was miles ahead of the clunky open up Windows, then jump to your preferred digital gaming store and then deal with updates for those things and trying to tie all it back into a single interface depending on whoever the maker of your handheld is. Now it's been solidified and kind of optimized in the Xbox app. Now the Xbox app going forward, again, it's not out yet, and at least not this new version. It's not out yet. It will be eventually released for the initially released for the ROG Ally X and Ally 2, I believe. And then, we've heard talks and conversations from executives that it will eventually go out to every other handheld. But again, turn it on, it goes straight into the Xbox if you're not introduced to Windows. And they've also streamlined a lot of the Windows functionality so that you're not going to be bothered with nearly as many updates for any of the functionality portions of Windows. So again, you can basically get in and out. The resume function is supposed to be optimized as well. That's also a big hamper on Windows, is that, usually when people turn things on, it takes forever to re-resume, and it doesn't resume in game where you left off. That's being changed as well. Again, the button UI, the layouts, the tying in all of your various digital stores into that one thing so that you can see your library of games, even if it's from Ubisoft or Activision, and they need specific requirements for you to have those libraries active on the device. They'll be funneled into this UI experience. So I think it's great. I'm looking forward to these things. I may not be a fan of the ROG X Ally specifically, but if this UX comes, this UI layer that Microsoft is working on, makes its way to all the other ones, I think it's great. I think it's them competing in real time to the Steam threat versus saying, all right, well, we heard you guys. Yeah. Steam is doing great. We'll get to it. And, a year from now, they haven't got to it, and Steam just runs off with the whole thing. And Microsoft's sitting there and holding the bag going, well, we lost another opportunity. Welcome back, Windows Phone.
Welcome back, Windows Phone. What a memory that is. And I think you're right. I would argue that Microsoft should have done the software stuff first. If I had to have an argument, I would argue and say the hardware announcement's nice, as our other media friends have said. The software experience might be where it's at. I would almost have preferred that at the game showcase they get, hey, you can download this new software experience on all of your handhelds. It is available today. And we have these new handhelds coming out that run this new experience. But to give you a taste, so you don't have to wait 6 months to see what it's going to be, the software is available today. That would have been my perfect Xbox showcase announcement.
I mean, you would have Sherlocked the ROG Ally X. Your partners wouldn't have appreciated it, but as a consumer, I am right there with you. The other thing we're going to talk about, moving on to the next topic, is I think this actually might be another story of yours, which is Copilot Vision. Is that what I have?
Yep, Copilot. What you got? Yep, you got Copilot Vision, and I will slide on to that one. Copilot Vision, to me, to give folks some idea of what I'm thinking when I think of Copilot Vision, imagine the screen recorder being able to tell you things about the content that you're looking at. It's kind of what Copilot Vision is. And I'm going to be honest, for me, Copilot Vision is a little bit scary. Maybe you guys think I'm crazy, but a AI agent watching what I do on my screen and being able to interact with that just screams to me that somebody is seeing what I'm doing on my screen real time, and maybe that information is being shared. Now, I know that that's probably not the way I should look at it, but that's just the way it makes me feel. But for those that are interested, Copilot Vision, and it comes with highlights, meaning that you can highlight certain things on your screen and ask Copilot about it. It has come out of beta. I did not try the beta for this one, and that's the reason why I just don't feel quite right yet with Copilot being able to analyze my screen. It's out of beta. It is available, interestingly, for Windows 10 and Windows 11 users. So you old Windows 10 folks that are losing your support, you can get this Copilot Vision feature. I just don't know how I feel about it. It bothers me. Do people want an experience where their screen is being, I'm going to use analyzed, recorded, interpreted? You can do multiple apps where supposedly, say you had Excel open on one side and Word open on the other side, and Copilot is intelligent enough to help you make decisions and analyze the data between the two apps. I'm just not sure that experience is what I'm looking for. It's out there for folks to try it. Yes, I will take one of our machines we're reviewing and put it on there without signing all my stuff in and just kind of see what it's like. But do people really want Microsoft or any of these AI services? Gemini, for example. Gemini has a similar feature where you can do it on your phone. Do we want these AI services interacting with the content that's live on our screen at that point in time? You do not get it automatically. You do have to opt into it. I want that clear. It's not like Copilot where it says, here you go. You do have to opt into this feature. But my concern would be that you turn it on, you use it for a Word document, you forget to turn it off, you open up your text messages to your family, your husband, your wife, and maybe Copilot sees something that it shouldn't. There's something about that. Maybe I'm the weird guy, but there's just something about that feels weird to me. So, my friend, are you going to use and or try Copilot Vision with highlights?
I'm going to try it because I try everything. I am not nearly as conspiratorial as you, or probably not nearly as privacy forward as you, and that could be good or bad. I use Recall, or at least have it on. This is just Recall. This is just Recall being summoned. I think this is the better version of Recall, to be honest with you. If Microsoft were to get rid of Recall today, I think this is a better implementation of that idea. The idea of that something's taking screenshots constantly of your device, no matter what thing you're in, and saving that. For anybody who was a fan or at least approaching that, this is the dream, I believe. This is the execution of it, because you have to initiate the search versus the thing just constantly scanning and storing and saving and taking no space on your device.
I can see that viewpoint.
So I think people do want this. They want to be able to, because if you think about the fundamental functions of this is just a Google search with a couple less steps. Because I doubt that there are going to be things on your personal device that aren't available on the web that you're going to engage with this in. So if you're looking at photos, videos of family gatherings, you're not necessarily going to, unless there's something in the video or on the photo that you are particularly saying, like, hey, you know what was that in the background? I really need to know, who was wearing, that lady had a great top on. I've never seen anything like it. I want to buy that top. I need to find it. You're going to do a Google search anyway of that specific thing. Now, the people in the video may not be part of that Google search. And if that's what your privacy concerns are about, I totally think those are valid. But the idea that you're going to play something, a video, personal video on your computer, and then go to Google and say, hey, where's this top at? Versus saying, all right, well, take a screenshot of my screen. Now find me that top. I don't see necessarily the big difference in privacy-wise or security-wise of that different thing. Now, I don't think Copilot Vision runs continuously. I think you initiate it and it takes, just like you said, a screenshot of what's occurring on the screen at the time. And then you're allowed to kind of search all of the different areas of the screen in that moment. And then I think once you're done with the search, again, I have to try this out, and I apologize if I'm getting this incorrect. Once you're done with the search, then you go on doing about what it is you're doing again, just like when you prompt Copilot to do, different types of searches that aren't visual. You're saying, hey, look this up for me. It is now, done doing that search. And until you initiate a new prompt, it's not doing anything. It's waiting for you to say, all right, Copilot, expand on that search or start me a new search. And I think that's how this vision thing works. I think it's great. The same way that it works on the phones. Again, you're not continuously recording your screen when you do what's it called? Google, oh God, I forget the name of it. The circular search, whatever thing. Yeah, the Gemini visual search. Yeah. You're not, and the same thing, but I think Apple just introduced something like that for the artificial intelligence at the WWDC event that we're talking about. It is very similar. Like you initiate the search, it and because you're not having to replicate from your own mind's eye the interpretation of what you're trying to search, you're not typing in like woman in fluffy red top that looks like it has feathers on it. What item is that? You're actually saying this is the exact thing. You look it up. You can visually see what it is. Go find it for me. I think it's a good benefit for everybody. I think, again, Microsoft needs to do this to keep up because, again, Google's already doing this. They're doing it on phones. They brought it to desktops a few months or last month. Apple just announced it. So I'm all for it. Again, if there are privacy concerns that I am being oblivious to, by all means, let me know in the comments. Let me know online.
And I may be guilty as charged here. I'm gonna say that I may be guilty as charged here. You may be 100% right that this is the feature that we've been looking for to say consumers now have a use for AI, and they go out and they have at it, and I hope they do. I was the one that when AI started and we were doing these pods about a year and a half ago, I said that AI was just a reinvent of a way to access search engines. That's the way I felt about it at the time.
Oh, and you're absolutely correct. This is still, I am not saying that this is AI. This is just Google search, but extended to your screenshot ability on Windows. That's all it is.
I'll be the first to admit, Copilot has its on screen in my setup. I went from being the doubter to got to have my Copilot. It's like my coffee. I got to have my coffee, got to have my Copilot. So Copilot and coffee go together. And this may be the feature that I fired up on a laptop and go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have said that on the podcast, but having like you not used it, those security concerns are something that I have in mind, but we'll just have to wait and see how Microsoft handle those.
Speaking of security, we got our next topic, which is Microsoft leaving the Seattle Convention Center, downtown Seattle Convention Center, based on security concerns, amongst other things. There was a report. Let me make sure I get all the details for it. Microsoft is making a major move that it is basically saying it will not host Build 2026 at the Seattle, what is the specific place called? I think it's just the downtown Seattle Convention Center. And they cite, at least from the email that was sent to, make sure I get everybody's attributions right. The internal memo sent to the tourism booster via Visit Seattle that they cited open drug use, visible drug use, and the presence of unhoused individuals as part of many reasons that it's not renewing its apparent contract with that area. We just had Build 2025. I'm not sure if these concerns were lodged before this and they just had to go through with the contract because they'd already signed it, or if these were part of the concerns that people had this year as well going into it. But there is a growing unhoused population in Seattle. And again, obviously, a lot of people that are unhoused head to the major metropolitan areas because of the weather, because of the resources. But it's interesting that Microsoft is saying, hey, you know what? We're not doing that here. We don't know where Build will be at in 2026. I suspect that they will just host it on the campus. You and I were having a conversation about the many reasons why this makes sense. It's unfortunate that the convention is losing Microsoft as this business, but we shouldn't also acknowledge that Build is just becoming somewhat boring. Maybe they don't have the audience or the capacity to fill this. And so renting a place that used to be able to house, upwards of 5,000 people, and you're only getting, I think this year, 3,000, it doesn't make financial sense for them either. So maybe those are the top three reasons. Of those three, which one do you think is the biggest driver of this change?
I think it's the environment. I really do.
Okay.
I would love to see the event move to different places. And if I was to take a bet, probably environment would be right there with the attendance numbers. I can see Microsoft's view of not wanting CEOs of companies and guests walking by, drug use and unhoused people. I can see that. And I can agree with that. And that also lets you know maybe just how bad that problem actually is in that area of unhoused people and drug use. And, Microsoft says, look, we don't want our sponsors and our partners thinking that we are subjected to that type of influence. I get it. The other thing is, like you said, 2,500, 3,000 people. That seems like an awful low number for developers of Microsoft products. And like you said, there could be various reasons. I think, after watching some of the build events this year that we just had, some of the events are kind of dry. It's like you're a coder and you're reading code. It feels just that dry. There's no punch. There's no excitement. There's no, this is where we're going to end up. And when I watched the entire Google I/O, I felt engaged in what Google was doing at Google I/O. And I don't develop code day in and day out like, some of the folks there do. But I felt engaged. I felt like it was something that I could follow, something that I could offer something to, something that I could ask questions. Or, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that, to your point, I think that we have to acknowledge that I think they had over 200,000 people register for Build.
That's true.
That's businesses, corporations. So there are people that are interested in at least the content or the information from builds. And they may just want to do it digitally. Again, we have had a restructuring both physically and mentally about the necessity for in-person gatherings of large quantities because of COVID. And people got used to being able, I think for at least 2.5, 3 years, get the information they need without spending the money to travel to go there. Again, it's fun to get there, meet other peers, and get a lot of the swag and get a lot of those connections. But at the end of the day, you're there to get the information, bring it back to your company, and execute on those things. And if they're handing out, betas and access all digitally, and the sessions are being held digitally, wouldn't it just be easier to be in your shorts at home eating chips and watching the sessions than it is to get dressed up in a suit, go to, run from a hotel to an area where you need to find a desk, start tidying up all your stuff, and hopefully, because a lot of people are using Windows, probably some people using Mac, whatever, finding outlets to, keep your juice throughout the entire, 9-10 hour day of sessions, then get back home, and then organize all this information so that you can bring it back to your business. You can do all that from your, office at home in the comfort of, in the time of your own choosing. I think that just makes more sense. But we also have to acknowledge, I think, part of what happened this year was that Google also held an event. And to what you're saying, I think a lot of the same developers who live in both worlds chose to go to the Google one. And I think Microsoft has to at least acknowledge that hosting a separate Windows event in the fall, which they do sometimes, is taking from that idea, because Google doesn't host a separate event. Now they might release Android, when they release their phone, but that isn't the event. That is a phone event. That is a hardware-based event. They put all their eggs in their developer basket. Same as with Apple. Apple might talk about iOS when they release the phone, but it's at the developer conference. Microsoft has extracted that layer of Windows and given its own event, in the summer or early fall, and just do, to your point, all the dry stuff about Azure, about cloud development, about AIG, about AI itself, quantum computing. That is what the developer conference. I think if they were to reincorporate Windows, they'd get back some of that consumer fervor about things that people can actually go out and immediately use in their everyday life, even if you're both a consumer and a prosumer.
And I agree with you. Having watched both of them, I get that developers need the meat and potatoes, so to speak, to make their app. But, and this is for our watchers and listeners, how many people feel overwhelmed when both companies start talking about the big product that delves down to 20, 25 different services to filter in here, to hook with this and hook with that and hook with this and cross this over here and tie this in over here. and make sure you buy all these services from our cloud.
Well,
that feels
especially during the keynote. That is the point. It's
Yeah.
like, I get that this is a developer conference. You have over 300 sessions of people who are going to do that drilling down.
Mm-hmm.
The keynote should be, to Apple and Google's point, here's how these developers who are going to go into these sessions, this is what you produce for the end user. And Microsoft's keynote is usually about, here are the APIs that we're going to give you. Good luck, have fun. And there's no broader vision of like, hey, this is what we're intending for you to make for the consumer. And the consumer being their business or whatever, I suppose, or whatnot. But, I think they should save some of this granular stuff that they get into in the keynote for the sessions and say, hey, here's some of the flashier things that these developers that are here are going to be able to make for, you, me, businesses, governments, or whatever. That makes it easy for them, and give examples of that versus like, all right, here's the code. We're going to do a demo of you implementing code. And it's like, all right, well, I'm glad you implemented the code, but what did the code do on the end user end? Like, what is a person in government who now has, who now has this new individualized app? How does their work change from yesterday to today? So, but anyway, we can go on about what they need to do for Bill. Hopefully they take some notes from this. But I mean, cloud is still their biggest revenue generator. So who knows if they're going to even acknowledge any of that beyond this move. But someone who is acknowledging something is Steve Ballmer. We had an interview, very lengthy.
Uncle Steve.
Yeah, he's back, ladies and gentlemen. He is, I guess in hindsight, I have a fondness for Ballmer.
I do too.
Enthusiasm. He didn't do a lot of the things correctly, but he did try. I will give him that. He was a guy who tried things. And again, Satya Nadella is navigating the ship of Microsoft very well. That is without a doubt. That is not within question. Their stock prices, 4 times double the, what Ballmer sat at. I think Ballmer sat at least at his highs, like $40-something, maybe 50. And we're seeing Microsoft, upwards of, with the dividend split of like 200 and something, maybe a little bit more than that. So,
well, let's remember one thing. Steve Ballmer kind of had to navigate the internet itself. When Steve was there, we were kind of discovering this way of connecting to the world and this way of putting the world in our hands. And I don't even think during Steve's time the word cloud was even a blimp on a map yet.
Well, that is, again, to his vision. And again, I'm not trying to eulogize this guy in the most positive way. I'm just acknowledging some of the things he did. He gave Satya the cloud early on. He was like, here, you do that. That is where where Satya kind of, cut his teeth on. He didn't focus on that. He was like, the cloud is going to be something, you nurture that. I'm going to focus on hardware, like the Surface devices, Zune. I'm going to chase Apple wherever they're going, and we're going to be better than them. The only problem was he was doing with Windows, which again, to this, our whole point is in the, I believe it's Acquired podcast, as the title of the podcast is called. Former Microsoft CEO Steve Ballmer provided a candid and energetic look back at his 34-year tenure at Microsoft. The episode, which I believe was released earlier this month, delves into a couple pivotal moments in Microsoft's history, from its foundational deals to its struggles and successes in the modern era of technology, to your point of navigating the internet, which became the ultimate equalizer and kind of cut down Microsoft's developer dominancy and kind of allowed Apple and Google to kind of proliferate underneath. Ballmer, who led Microsoft CEO from 2000 to 2014, addressed the company's landmark deals with IBM, the disk operating system, DOS, that set Microsoft on its path to dominance. He offered his firsthand perspective on the evolution of the company's enterprise business, the vision he was instrumental in building. But again, the central theme, I think, for those of us who are Microsoft hardware heads, the central theme of the interview was Ballmer's candid admission to Microsoft's strategic blunders in the mobile market. He stated plainly, we were too confident. identifying an over-reliance on Windows brand and business models as the core of the problem. According to Ballmer, the critical mistake was not necessarily sticking with Windows brand itself, but rather trying to force a PC-centric operating system and its corresponding APIs into a nascent smartphone market where it didn't naturally belong. He explained, quote, I don't think we stuck with Windows too long. I think what we did was we tried to put Windows in places that did naturally go. And for those of us who had been saying this for the last, 12 years or so, we're all smacking your head. Give yourself a little ointment. You were correct then. You were correct now. He's apparently seen the light of day, so to speak. He was just obviously too little too late. But what are your thoughts on Windows Phone forcing Windows onto smartphones the way that they did, and its inevitable outcome?
I'm going to have a little chuckle here and take us down memory lane for about 15 seconds. I was going through one of my accounts the other day and found some apps that had the word for Windows Phone on the end of them, which meant and took me back to my memory of using Windows Phone and all its mistakes and glory and things it didn't do and things that exploded, and that whole people app where the people were supposed to connect and you were supposed to go find these people on Facebook, Twitter, whatever other. MySpace was a thing back then, and you could hit this person's name and supposedly see all their information. I get it, but I also understand Steve's point. I used the Palm Trio. I believe it was the Palm Trio W for Windows. If you remember, there was a Palm Trio that ran Windows. There was a HTC device that ran Windows
6.5 and Windows 6.
Yep. I reviewed both of those devices. I reviewed them for what they were. But Steve is correct. Windows had no business in its current form trying to shove it on a phone, especially when the iPhone was already here and making that headway. We had already seen an Android phone making that headway. And it kind of goes back to what we talk about here on the pod a lot. When a consumer has decided this is the experience we want, this is the experience we like. Thank you, Apple. There's the Apple. Thank you for the pod. Apple did that. The users were saying, this is the experience. Microsoft tried to shove Windows in that phone and recreate some type of experience. I think Microsoft could have been a lot more successful if they had built a phone OS and not attempted to shove Windows in it.
I'm going to jump in and say the OS isn't my issue. I think they were still ahead of their time with the UI and the UX of Windows Phone.
So you were a tile guy.
Yeah. I mean, tiles are just squared off icons to begin with. Like the way that they navigated the tiles, that could be up for interpretation. Obviously, there should have been some refinement there. Had no problem with the tiles. The hubs, I think, were an excellent idea. Extracting, this is where we're getting into AI, extracting information and content from the brand itself and just delivering what people wanted, which is what the hubs are trying to do. I think two things are going unsaid here is that Microsoft tried to leverage Windows on smartphones the same way that it leveraged Windows on desktops, which meant it was charging its partners to use Windows. And you couldn't do that when Apple and Android, specifically Android, were giving it away. So it became harder for companies to say, hey, you know what? I'm going to pay to use this operating system that nobody's using. Versus saying, all right, well, it's given to me for free. What do I have to lose here? I save money. Go ahead.
Wasn't there a carrier that refused to sell Windows phones because of that license back then? It seems like there was a carrier, one of the major carriers, that did not sell Windows phones because of that license, because they didn't like what it did to the pricing.
There could have been. I'm not very certain. I think all of them started off, and then eventually a lot of them dropped out. And I think AT&T became one of the only ones left at the very end, and that was like the last ones who picked up the Surface Duo. But I think it started off like Sprint did it. They had a Windows Phone. T-Mobile had a Windows Phone. Verizon it was like their premier carrier for a while. Then AT&T became one, and I think they all just were again at the end of the day saying, no one's using this, and we're being charged to make this phone versus saying, all right, we have extra hardware that we use for both Android and Windows, and we'll put both operating systems and let them battle it out in the market of competition. That was one of the main things. Two was they went for the easy, or at least what they thought was the easiest line of developer buying was that, hey, if you have an app on Windows, use the same sort of APIs that don't belong on smartphones to bring your app over to this thing. And people were creating new experiences and different apps on smartphones that coincided with how they were developed for iOS and Android. And they're saying, I don't want to make the same Windows app on this device and only be confined to it here. And Microsoft was like, well, it just makes sense. We have a billion apps on Windows. If we just do the same thing on the phone, it should equal a billion apps here. We win. And they didn't work out that way. Mm-hmm. So beyond paying, having partners pay for it, and then two, telling developers to basically recreate, but also with more work, the same experience in Windows here, especially when the UI was being consolidated between Android apps and iOS apps. Even though iOS had the back icon at the top, the UI of it was basically the same on both devices. And on Windows, it was entirely different. It's like, hey, use the Metro UI. It became a lot more work to do what should have been the exact same thing. That's where they started to fumble. And branding was a bad thing. The carrier, getting investments in the carriers to say, hey, market our phones, put more commercials out on your own, not us having to pay for it constantly. That just became, one thing after another. So many other dominoes kept falling for them that just wasn't working. But I'm glad to say that, he, even though it's obviously way too late and basically destroyed Nokia in the process, is saying, hey, we effed up. This is, part of the reasons why. I would, we can go on and on about this, for days, but I suggest everyone go watch the podcast because it is on YouTube, I believe. You can go listen to it. Again, it's called Acquired, I believe, about 2.5, almost 3 hours long. You get a lot of information. You also get to the section in Ballmer's life where he wasn't talking to Bill Gates because they had a falling out about his, trying to follow hardware. Bill Gates was, more software oriented, said this was a lost endeavor. It ultimately led to be that, but I appreciate his idea. We got things like the Kin phone. We got a Zune.
Yeah,
we got a Windows Phone. He was also helping pitch Xbox. I believe Gates wasn't a big fan of the Xbox itself. I think he also allowed for for someone to breathe life into the Courier project. I think ultimately Bill Gates said, "Hey, can I do email?" And they said no, and he killed the project. But he was willing to do these things, and for the time we got to play around with. We got to us Windows folks got to be in the smartphone world with our own specific device, and it was fun. We led at the time for camera development. I think Nokia was ahead of its game and kind of led that area. So I acknowledge his faults, applaud his effort. You guys should go check out the interview and let us know your thoughts on his tenure at Microsoft. We'll move on to one of our last topics, which is Google doing a voluntary buyout. This is an interesting story because it basically, it's a preemptive layoff story, something, again, we don't take pride in, we don't, really like talking about, but this is what it's leading to. Google initiated a back to work program last year, I think it was. So they're going back to the 5 days in the office kind of thing. And they took a very hardline stance, like saying, hey, if you don't like it, you're basically fired. It seems like they softened on that stance and have taken this new voluntary buyout strategy. The article details Google's offering its workforce softer layout option, essentially. The primary driver for these buyouts is the increasing pressure on Google's core advertising business. The company is reportedly bracing for slow growth due to intensifying competition and the disruptive potential of AI. And plus their investments in AI. They've invested a ton of money into AI. And again, there's no immediate ROI for anybody in this field just yet. We're all just hoping that it'll pay off because it'll catch wind and catch fire at some point. But in the meantime, to offset some of this, to tell investors, hey, we are being fiduciary responsible with your money, they are going to offer these buyouts. And now specifically, the nature of the programs are structured as a voluntary separation program, VSP, presented to employees as an option to leave the company willingly. The program is obviously, we just said, a cost-cutting measure. They're basically saying if you don't want to return to the office for the 5-day work week, we will pay for you to leave the company altogether, and good luck, farewell. We leave on amicable terms. What are your thoughts on this?
It's a layoff, like you said, it's a layoff without using the word layoff. And I think they're hoping that there's a certain number that they have in mind, I'm sure, where they're expecting that this number of people should take advantage of the offers that we're giving, and they're looking at employee feedback, they're looking at employee attitude, they're looking at employee performance, and they probably even have some idea of what employees are going to take the offer and what employees aren't. And they may get surprised that more take it, they may get surprised that less take it. But at the end of the day, I think there's a number of people, just like there is we talked about Microsoft last week, laid off another 6,000 people. There's a number that Google's got to get to. They're going to see where this voluntary layoff takes them, what number they get. They're going to think about it for a little while, come back probably the end of the year and say, okay, now we're laying off X, to make sure they get to that number that they need to get to for their records and financial statements and all that good stuff by the end of the year. Now, are the severance packages good? I don't know that a severance package in this economy right now is good. I don't think, there's anything you're going to put on a paper unless you have an unhappy employee for whatever reason. I don't think there's anything you're going to put on a paper that says, yes, I'm going to take that offer. I'm going to walk out in this unemployment environment we're in, and I'm going to be fine. I can tell you, if I worked at Google, happy or not, there's not a number that they're going to put on a piece of paper that makes me say, yes, I'm leaving. It's good. I'm okay. Because after you have spent that money, paying your bills, living your life, you've eventually got to face this bear of a job market. I get it, Google. It feels better. It makes you maybe feel a little bit better about the PR stance instead of Microsoft coming out and saying, yes, 6,000 people have gone. I get it, but it's the same thing. I don't see where it backfires necessarily on Google, but it's the same thing for the employees. It's just maybe they have a choice. Maybe they don't.
Yeah, I'm not going to belabor the party anymore. We'll find out, when they do the quarterly earnings for the end of the year. So not this upcoming earnings, but I guess at the start of next year, we'll find out what the actual effects were on this, and if this is a good policy for the company to take, not obviously for employees, because we are always employee first here at this podcast.
Yes, we are.
The last section we're going to do, at least as far as news is concerned, is a little schadenfreude. We had WWDC this year, and it happened, what was it, Monday? You and I were basically communicating back and forth during the event with some snark. Apple came out and introduced basically a rebranding of all of its operating systems. That was its big thing. It didn't really do AI. it made a few mentions.
Windows Arrow comes to Mac. There we go.
Very much so, ladies and gentlemen. That is the key takeaway from this event. I believe that is what everyone's talking about. I'm sure there are a lot of people who are Mac heads that are going to go over the specific features. We will go over a few of them. But the talking point is that they decided, because they didn't really have much to say as far as AI is concerned, and again, not judging good or bad in that, because we have yet to see AI pay off. Maybe Apple's in the right position to say, hey, there's nothing to talk about because there's nothing here. But in lieu of that, they decided they're going to just redesign the hell out of their operating systems. And for better or for worse, there was a lot to talk about here. The new design language is called Liquid Glass. Brings a more translucent and layered look to the user interface with elements that are designed to reflect and refract content behind them. This UI is based on a lot of Vision Pro stuff, apparently, a lot of rounded corners, soft corners, but layers of glass in front of a bunch of content. There is not nearly as much mica or I forget the name of the other term is called, frosting, in order to make this visually appealing. That was my first mark, was that any of you who have used a piece of glass or wear glasses and try to read content sometimes realize that, the content is augmented by the glass itself. And Apple seems to be relishing on this, except unfortunately, for people who are using the phone on, anything on a 7-inch or smaller screen, it starts to become obscure. And even in their own demos, you can see this. Their docks, sidebars, and toolbars are all beginning this on the phone. They've implemented the theming, the icon theming that is part of Android now. I believe Android, what is it called? Android U. I forget the name of the design language that Android is choosing now these days, but whatever it's called, they allow you to theme color most icons. Some icons don't adhere to it, but Apple is doing it. And they're doing it with the translucent layer too. So you can just have icons that are see-through, which again, you would think sounds great. Let you see more of your background. In actuality, it doesn't look very good. What are your thoughts on the visual part? And then we'll get into some of the specific features that are coming with the new iOS 26, macOS 26, watchOS 26, Apple TV OS 26, and iPad OS 26, yes.
I could sit here and bash Apple and say,
and you should.
And I probably should, that, Apple has finally reached where Windows was in 2015, 2016, 2017. I get it. But Apple, they do a lot of analytics. They know what their users want.
Do they?
They know. I think when it comes to the iPhone, they do. Because
right. I'm being pedantic.
That is where they make their bread, and they know that. And I think this is a stopgap move. I do. They'll do this for a year or two. If this does well or doesn't do well, they will move on to whatever they really have in mind. I don't see this as a major thing, because we open our apps, we go through our daily routine. In this case, for any phone, we go through our daily routine, and I would be really curious as to know, do people actually pay attention to what their phone looks like? I don't. I go in it for the usability. We get into this deal of, muscle memory. We get, I pick my phone up now. I know flick down, that's going to show me this. That's going to show me that. That's going to get me where I need to go. I've accomplished my task. I put it back down. I didn't care what color the screen was. I didn't care what color the background was. I really didn't care what color the icon looked like. If it was in the place that my muscle memory expected it to be, I'm good. And I think most people are that way. And I think that's kind of where we get a little chuckling at Apple, because Apple, their presentations, they want to be involved in your daily activities. and they're making your daily activities easier. They're making your daily activities better. And I'm sure they are. But I think 90% of people are in their routine. And Apple is playing inside the box of that routine. When they step outside of that routine, they may get some backlash. You know, did they change the way people access texting? Did they change the way people access TikTok? Did they change my routine of going through these things? Did they change my routine of accessing my calendar every morning to remind me, one, what day of the week it is, because I'm an old man, and two, reminding me what I have to get done that day? And it's just a look. It's not like Windows 8 where Microsoft said, no more start menu. Here's these tiles. Figure it out. And what did people do? They screamed as hard as they could. Microsoft says, okay, we'll give you your start menu back. This is not on that level. Apple is just tinkering with it to see what you go for.
They did in fact hide most of the icons in the camera app, and I believe they drilled
now that they did that,
how useful and intuitive the camera app is, and then they went and hid most of the features and functions behind in a Johnny Ive type of minimalist way of saying, hey, you only need these 3 buttons and that'll get you through everything. Versus again, they had all of the features visible on the camera, so now people need to find out how to do, if they want to do promotion video, or if they want to do slow motion video stuff, if they want to do additional things in the camera app, they did hide that stuff. I'm saying that this UI design does mess with that though, because it isn't like the UI doesn't get in the way. The UI will be a issue for people who have trouble seeing, because this glass makes it harder to see things. That is that. So you may have muscle memory, like, hey, if I push my finger here and there, that these things will show up. But when you're searching on the web and you're trying to go something specifically in the URL button, and there's like content coming up behind where you're typing in the URL, and now you can't see what you're typing, people are like, hey, well, what the hell is this? Like, I understand, like, I know where the URL is at the bottom of the Safari thing, and I go to type in a new website. I still need to be able to see what I'm typing in order to be like, that's confirmed, that's where I want to go exactly, click on it. And now when I look down there, you have background of whatever's previously on there, interrupting my vision of the text that's on there. So I'm trying to type in Microsoft.unboxed.com. I can't tell if that's an F or not, and I click it, and now it's like, you went to the wrong URL. It's like, all right, well, you've now interrupted my day. I could have confirmed that it wasn't an F, fixed it, and been at the right spot already. Now I have to go back down to that little funky looking URL thing to type in the correct one. I'm already 3 steps behind, and however many seconds later I'm searching this. And if it's a search for food or gas or something, if you're on the go and someone's like, hey, can you look that up real quick because we're about to be there in a few minutes, and now I've taken a few seconds off your time, I think people are going to be like, hey, this UI is a problem. Enough about the UI. There were some actual features that were mentioned. People that are Apple fans can now look forward to a more functional, and we'll start with macOS, Spotlight. This is one thing I do envy from those people who
I do too.
Mac. This Spotlight is getting a lot of new features. They're getting actions and quick keys. They're getting deeper integration into the file system and connecting to the web. They're getting clipboard history and enhanced search on the Spotlight. And you're going to be able, and they're using what they call Apple Intelligence, but it's basically algorithms in order to tie in the search and make it more robust. You can start to do command prompts within the search itself. And you can also tie actions to events in the search. So if you're saying, whenever I go to search, don't look for these type of things or exclude these things from my search. When you specifically type those things in, you'll start to see that those are excluded from your search. Or if you type in like, hey, anytime I type in tree, look for these, types of instances of trees, you can, automatically start, doing that within the search, or at least Spotlight itself. That was pretty cool. They're getting some new customization features that offer a more personalized and clear look for app icons. Again, the dock at the bottom is getting that translucent glass looking layer. They're getting, I think they're, the other thing they're getting is the iPhone mirroring, which is similar to Windows Phone Link. If you have, specific phones, I believe Galaxy phones that don't even do Surface Duos anymore. But basically, you get like a little windowed version of your phone that you can start to operate, not through touch, unfortunately, but you can navigate that same app on your phone directly. The other thing they're getting a new dedicated apps area, kind of like less functional version of the Xbox app or the Game Pass app, I suppose. Those are from Mac OS. For iPad OS, which I think stole the show. This is, I think, what everyone who is Mr. I can transfer from a Mac or desktop environment to a tablet only environment all the time. You hear these people constantly saying that. This is bringing them closer. Now, this is becoming a shoehorn theory, though, because Microsoft made the Surface Pro and everyone complained that it wasn't a touch-friendly operating system. This is going to the same conclusion, just from a touch-friendly to a less touch-friendly environment, where now people can do as many windows as they want. They're offering a ton of multitasking, which makes the keyboard almost becoming a necessity the way that it's done. I think visually showing you have to like grab the bottom corner of an app in order to reshape and resize it. They're getting the 3 dots, the red, yellow, and green things to resize icons. You can put as many as you want in there, and I believe they hold their space overlapping windows. Stage Manager Pro is what they're calling this area, where you can kind of do and save your windowed environments. They're getting enhanced external display support for Mac OSs. For iPad OS, and they're getting a couple. I think you can choose audio outputs. So if you're doing some sort of recording or podcasting directly off your device, you can have more control over those kind of things. My question is, aside from this thing becoming a Surface Pro, essentially, what's going to be the battery life of having this? Because there was a reason why they tombstoned and did the way that they did multitasking on these iPads in order to get this great 10 plus hour, 12-hour battery life. When you have multiple windows running at once, I know the M Silicon is great, but I start to see that some of that going down. What are your thoughts on at least those 2 operating systems getting updates?
I agree with what you said there, that when they got to the iPad, that's even when I perked up when I saw the colored dots in the corner. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, finally, we have managed to synchronize how we control our windows from our Mac to our tablet. Congratulations, Apple. Then Craig, I believe it was Craig that did the audio part. They made this big deal of being able to control your audio output on your iPad. And I was like, shouldn't we have been able to do that 5 years ago? And why is controlling your audio output such a great idea that gets Craig all excited in the presentation? But at the end of the day, I think Apple is very, very, very slowly crawling toward a place where there is some version of Mac OS on a tablet. Now, to give Apple a little bit of credit, I used to be the Apple fanboy. I used everything Apple for about 10 to 12 years. My family was in it. My brother was in it. My nieces and nephews had their Apple devices. Well, here's the thing. Apple usually does things late. Case in point. But when they do it late, a lot of times they do end up right about a lot of things. And I think we're in that in-between cycle with their OSs. I think we're in that in-between cycle where Apple Intelligence, they're waiting. They see the thinner devices Intel and AMD are making. They see the more powerful, thinner devices AMD and Intel are making. They see what Google and Microsoft are doing with AI, and they're letting them do it. And they're waiting to see what kicks off. And if it kicks off that people start migrating to these new Surface devices that are ARM powered, What do you think is going to happen next? Apple OS, Mac OS, or whatever term they put on it, coming to your iPad. And suddenly you get the full desktop experience on that M1 device. And it slowly builds or rebuilds the M series chip. For example, the M series chip in the iPad may be half the power of the whatever generation we are in the laptops. And, buy the iPad for this. They're not going to cannibalize all the YouTubers and creators out there that are buying the M3s, the M4s. They're not going to cannibalize those until they have something else to offer them. But I could see a place, I could see a time where Apple's watching. This succeeded. Do it with the iPad. Do it now. We'll be right where we need to be. And I think that's where they are with their products right now. They're in that lull phase that they get in every 4 or 5 years, where they incrementally do things. They watch what everybody else does, and then perfect it. Pixelmator comes to mind. I believe it was Pixelmator, where they had the idea of drawing on the iPad. Apple comes up with something. Pixelmator, I believe it was Pixelmator. You guys can, I may have the wrong app, but afterwards they went out and they bought that company. They said, okay, we like what you're doing, so instead of building our own, we'll just go buy it. That's what Apple does. They wait for everybody else to do it, and then they decide how to react. And I think we're in that waiting period here.
I agree with you. The other couple things they get, at least for iPad OS, is you get a menu bar, which is the Mac style thing at the top, which could be, again, I'm saying this is all becoming more mouse precision useful than it is for touch. But yeah, you're going to be able to have that same familiar, menu bar at the top to navigate and save and do all the extra features. Again, so that won't be hidden, which is great. But again, I think the pinpoints for that are going to be, super small. The other thing they get is a preview app. So now you can, negate having to get an Adobe Acrobat or any other type of PDF/service or whatever. And then lastly, you get improved Files app. The Files app has been updated with new lists, views, resizable columns, collapsible folders. You can also drag folders to the dock for quick access and set default apps for specific types. You can change the color and icons on these apps. So you get a little more file management, which is obviously always good. I don't use an iPad, but these all seem great. I do use a Surface Pro, and it feels very, very much like that these days. And again, if you're listening, I suggest you go look at some hands-on. You pretty much navigate this thing the same way I feel like you would navigate a Surface Pro for the most part. Now, again, there's still touch-friendly applications that were made by developers, but the system itself is becoming very much like the Surface Pro. Lastly, there was watchOS 26 that was introduced. That was a much more minor note. They added some kind of new workout buddy, and they're also incorporating the liquid glass feature. The workout buddy was, a bit of controversy for myself because it sounds annoying. I think other people who at least work out and use those apps find that so annoying because this thing just constantly talks, but it's there to cheer you on. It's really dystopian. It's for anybody who doesn't have friends but needs a friend while they're working out. The way I work out, I don't need friends. I don't like talking to anybody. I'm in my zone. This is why I have headphones on, or I'm there to do the workout and get out of there. But again, there are people who will work out with friends, and maybe they don't have a friend that day, so they use the workout buddy. There's voice-based coaching, and they support even more workouts for indoor and outdoor stuff, cycling, and those people who do the HIIT or strength training. The smarter interactions and new apps that'll be added, and gesture controls. The new gesture control, which I think is great, is the flick of the wrist, which will get rid of notifications and unwanted phone calls. I think Android needs to adopt that because you sit there and you look and you're like, I don't want to talk to this person. Now you have to turn your wrist and hit the button and usually do a swipe to get it off. Sometimes you end up accidentally swiping and answering. You're like, I didn't really want to talk to this person, or you find out it's spam. Being able to just kind of say no, go away, I think is great. So we'll see if Android or at least Samsung adopts that later. And I think that's most of the highlights, at least for a Microsoft-centric podcast that we're going to talk about here. we're going to, unless you have any last words about WWDC, we'll
No,
move
go
on to
ahead.
our last thing is free play days and what we're doing this weekend. So I'll let you go over the details of the free play days and the games that are available.
Yep, and I'm kind of going to scoot through this. I realize that we have kept people here for over an hour already, so we appreciate your patience and your time while we have worked through some of this. But I heard this, some of you folks, from some of the emails that I received, that free play days, the way we cover them, was appreciated. So this week we have another free play days, and we have something pretty cool. Construction simulator. Microsoft seems to do good at throwing those little simulators up the last week. Construction simulator gives you the chance to try your hand at being a construction worker, a construction contractor with 90 officially licensed construction machines and 24 recognized brands. So you can try your hand at being a construction contractor with over 100 missions. We also have, let me make sure I get the title of our game correct. We have Bassmaster Fishing. I believe this one was in free play days about 6-8 weeks ago because I recognize the box screenshot, but you can take yourself out, go fishing. You can fish in the Bassmaster tournament. For those that know about fishing, both of these titles are, guess what, play anywhere. So enjoy it on your cloud, enjoy it on your phone, enjoy it on your console. Remember that there are discounts for these titles during free play days. And off the top of my head, Construction Simulator is down to $19.99. Let's see, the fishing game, Bassmaster Fishing, is down to $7.99. And we have one more that is a preview of a game called, I want to make sure I say this right, Towerborn. This is a loot brawler with side-scrolling RPG action and progression with endless customization. This one lasts a little longer. Instead of being just for the weekend, it is June 12th, which was yesterday, all the way through June 18th. Now, for me, I'm going to go try out that construction simulator. There's just something about that seems cool. But let us know which ones you try out. Both of these look pretty good.
With that being said, what are you doing this weekend? It's Father's Day.
It's definitely Father's Day, so there's going to be some Father's Day time in there. But I've got to get this butt in because I've got about 2 hours to get my workday done, get everything closed up because the Reloaded Gears of War beta starts at 3 p.m. Eastern and runs all the way to Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern. So I'm definitely going to be picking up my Lenovo Legion Go, getting in front of those Lenovo gaming systems because this game is supposed to support 4K 120 FPS. I want to see my Gears of War at 4K 120. It's also supposed to be a game that is optimized for handhelds. I want to see if we're there in this beta yet and see what our Legion Goes do with this title because I think, I love it. It brings back a lot of memories for me. I'm very excited to get in there, but I think this is going to bring back a lot of memories for a lot of people.
Yeah, I will be playing probably more Shadow of Mordor. I realize that I've only been experiencing about 6% of the game. Apparently, there's a ton more, and I've been going around trying to kill bosses and not, getting further into the game progression. So there's a lot more I need to do. We're also going to be taking a trip up to Disney, so we're celebrating standing in lines and eating Disney food and riding Disney rides for a little bit this weekend. And writing more reviews. I just released my review of the Lenovo Legion Go S. My thoughts on it are it's expensive for what it offers, but it also is a sign of some commoditization of the market already. Lenovo's offering, the Lenovo Legion Go was a little more expensive. Now they're offering, what their, cheaper alternative is, and this will continue to happen. I think the next iteration, when they do the Lenovo Legion Go 2 and then Lenovo Legion Go S2, they'll start to keep bringing its prices down. You and I have both said on this pod and various pods before this that handhelds, I think, are the future. We will continue to see them kind of thrive, so I'm excited for that. But I also have some laptop stuff that I need to cover for you guys. I've talked about the slim 7, I think, is the next one I'll be coming up with. I just did the Yoga 9i. If you guys are playing around with that, I have a couple Dells that I need to talk about now that they follow this new weird name convention. But they are definitely excellent devices. If you're looking for, if you're a person who envies the Mac world, these things are kind of on par with that, at least as far as build quality is concerned. The operating systems are great at. I'm trying out some AMD chips and some Intel ones as well, kind of pitting them against each other. Plus, I have a Mac that I can also run tests with as well. So expect to see some more hardware reviews coming out next week. That being said, if people want to talk and chat with you over the weekend, where can they find you?
Well, you're probably better off to put a post on social media to get my attention. So that's David PAJ1978 over at Blue Sky. That will be where I'll be. I went ahead and put up a Gears of War post yesterday just to see if anybody got any feelers for it, because I was seeing a few other folks that were maybe as excited as I am for it. So if you want to jump in, I'm not going to put my gamer tag out here on the pod, but if you want to jump in, hit me up over at Blue Sky. I'll share my gamer tag with you. Maybe we can get in there and shoot some things and blow some things up and maybe do some co-op. I think that's part of the beta for this week. Now, remember, I need to throw out there that there is a second beta for Gears of War next week where they're opening up more levels and more maps and opening up more of the feature stuff. If you don't get in there this week, shame on you, but you can still get in there next week, and maybe that'll hold you over until August. So, my Happy Hulk friend, that's where you are, correct?
That is correct. You can find me at Happy Hulk and Blue Sky. That is where I spend most of my time these days. On there, you'll find I usually talk about politics and comics. There you can find me on Threads talking mostly just specifically about comics. Those are 2 spots. If you don't find me there, I will be out touching grass, which I suggest you guys all do as well. Enjoy the weather if it's nice where you're at. If not, I always suggest that you guys stay indoors, find your favorite movie, find your favorite song, find your favorite food, and enjoy all 3 indoors if you can. Until then, see you guys next week. Thanks for hanging out with us for another, albeit long podcast, but hopefully we'll have more new, very information and news about Microsoft next week for you.
Have a good weekend, my friends.